I'm Josh.
I'm Michelle.
And this is Little Bandology, episode 4. Episode 4. We've made it to 4. Look at that. This episode, we're going to talk about building culture, which is something that is a little bit different for everybody, I think. But you want to make it and really sort of creates a memorable experience for kids, I think. That's kind of what they remember more than the music you played or the trophies you won or the awards you won.
The experience they had. Which,
funny enough, along those lines, we went out to eat not too long ago in a town just down the road from ours. It wasn't where we live, but we ordered our food and we ordered our appetizer, and our waiter came over and he said, the appetizer is on the house. We were like, oh, that's fantastic. Like, we thought we'd won something. And he said, no, your last name's King. And we were like, yeah. And he said, oh, my manager, you were her band director. And we were like, which one of us? He said, I don't know. Let me go check. And so, and he said her name.
And then she walked by and he said, that's her right there.
That's her. And we looked. The name did not ring a bell. And then we looked, and her face.
Her face was familiar.
Was familiar, but did not ring a bell. And so in those circumstances, what do? We began to Google and Facebook and Instagram.
Trying to see if we can find her on social media.
If we knew who she was. And we found her on social media. And strangely enough, I taught her husband in band.
But it was me. I was the band director.
Michelle was actually the band director in this situation. And she came over and had a nice conversation with us. And she comped our appetizer and said, anytime we come through.
Sweet.
She was very sweet. And I looked at Michelle when she left and I said, do you remember her? And Michelle said, maybe. And so
I did recognize her face, but her name didn't ring a bell. And now I can't even remember what instrument she said she plays. But you associate the student with their instrument. And I think if maybe she had been holding her instrument in her hand, it may have been easier to remember. But in my defense, I would have taught her 13 years ago. It was a long time ago.
Well, and I told students this week I was in the band hall with some of my juniors, and they were talking and asked me if I remembered every student I'd ever taught. And I said, I remember their faces. I may not remember their names. And they said, that is disappointing, Mr. King. And I said, I've been teaching longer than you children have been alive.
I did. Well, in that same trip to Tyler that we were in Aldi, and one of my students was like, Miss King.
Yes, and she did remember that.
I did remember him, but he was also just a few years ago. It wasn't.
And he was a
character.
College.
Yes,
he was quite the character.
He was a great trumpet player, though.
He seemed like he would be a lot of fun.
He was that Carthage band that I just loved so much. They worked so hard, and we started off rocky and ended out so strong. There was a good group.
So there you go. If you build the culture, they'll remember that.
They'll remember you 13 years later. You may not remember them.
Yeah. I also think this is a point to tell all band students, if you want your band director to remember you, especially if it's Michelle, make sure you have your horn with you at all times.
Just be holding your horn.
And that will probably do it since that's how she associates that. Talking about culture, it really has to start with a commitment from you and your staff. If you're by yourself, that makes it very easy to make that commitment, I guess. But it definitely needs to start with you and your staff saying, this is what we want our band to be. We had a band director when we were in college who probably one of the smartest things I think he ever said was, in 3 years, your band is a reflection of you. And that was 100% right. Dr. David Campo, you were right. You can mark it down. I finally said it. It just took me a lot of years to say it. But I completely believe that. And so you have to start with that in mind, is what do you want your band to be a reflection of? And coming into a new situation, when I came into Beckville, was I wanted to see where the students were, but I know where I wanted to go. And I have a philosophy, if ever I am not moving in a positive direction, I'm not doing the most good, and I don't need to be there. Luckily, that has not happened while we've been at Beckville. It's constantly moving in a positive direction. It's a joy to go to work every day. That was one of the big things. And so we really focus on, now that we've sort of got a little bit of standing, we really are focusing in on the bottom level and building to the top level.
Yeah. We give a lot. I mean, we give a lot of care to all of our students, but I feel like we give extra care to those babies.
Yes.
Because if they have a good experience at the very beginning and they feel like we 100% care about them, then they're going to stick with us. and we're going to get more out of them. If they trust us, it's going to turn out better for the band.
And this is something in the last year and this year, now that we have every student in our program in sixth grade, that gives us a chance to make good human beings. And if band can't make good human beings, then what are we doing? You can only do so much with putting a horn to face and creating musicians. Let's be honest, most of those students are not going to become music majors. They're not going to become professional musicians, but they are going to become members of our society and possibly teachers, but probably parents at some point. And we want them to have any help that we can give them, starting from the ground up. Even those students that quit, whether they're removed from band or whether they do it of their own accord, and whenever that happens, we want them to have those skills. And so we start with our sixth grade, and it starts day one. You know, we talked about my one rule: don't be dumb. It's a good rule for life, but we talk about that from the very beginning, about how we have a culture, a band culture of we want to be excellent. We want to be the best students on campus. And I've heard this said many times: band kids are the best kids. And I truly believe that.
I do too. I think our kids are the best kids.
So in sixth grade, the big thing is sixth graders are extrinsically motivated.
Right. They don't know how to be intrinsically motivated yet. So
now, and we'll have the exception. And those students, you just pray they never quit because they're leaders for everybody else. But something that we do is we give a lot of verbal praise. Now, it's not all sunshine and roses and unicorns and rainbows.
But I also think it's important. Like I have this conversation with all of my classes. My job is to make you the best musician possible. And so if I always tell you how awesome you are, you're not going to get better. And so we have this conversation. Listen, I'm going to say things to you that might hurt your feelings, and it's okay to have your feelings hurt, but understand that I'm not coming from a place of meanness. I'm coming from a place of love because I want you to be better. And so if we can just have that understanding together, it's okay, let your feelings be hurt, but know that that's something that needs to get better. And it's the same for everybody. Like if you want to get better at something, you need somebody who's going to be honest with you and not just sugarcoat everything all the time.
Yes, and I feel like we do that at all levels of our band program in Beckville and everywhere I've ever taught.
And listen, like when kids struggle with stuff, when they get it, that's like huge celebration time. We really make a big deal about we're so proud of you. You worked so hard. For example, there's a seventh grader that I have. Bless her heart. Last year, she could not get past clapping and counting eighth notes.
Oh, yes.
And it was mostly because she couldn't get her foot to do the right thing. When we do a lot, we will clap and count with them. We will, pull them along. We're going to give them every single opportunity to learn how to do this. But bless her heart, she really struggled. But this year, dude, she got it like on the first day. Mm-hmm. And did we have a celebration? And every day that she does that, every time that she gets those eighth notes, I'm like, man, you are killing it. I'm so proud of you. You've worked so hard. Thank you for working on that, all of that stuff. But we try to make it a big celebration. When kids struggle and then they get it, like we let them know that we're so proud of them.
Our society, if it's not easy right at the beginning, people tend to stop doing it.
Yeah.
I'm guilty of this. Going to the gym is not easy. And so, but that's a whole nother podcast.
I wish you would come with me in the mornings.
Yeah, But anyway, I tell students right from the get-go, band is not easy. Band has easy aspects and it has difficult aspects. And everybody is different. And you cannot compare yourself to anybody the first year. Now, do we do chair tests? Yes. But everybody is going to have that wall that is difficult to climb. If they understand that wall is coming, when they hit it, it's not as big a deal. And you work them through it. Some people, it happens the first day. Some people, it takes a little while. We have seventh graders that really haven't hit their wall yet, but I could see it coming.
Right.
As we do things. And so one of the things that we do in our sixth grade is, we've said this before, we pass off rhythm every day. It's something that they can get a little bit better at every single day. We don't reward every attempt. There are certain parameters. For example, they have to tap their foot. Kids forget how to tap their foot. They have to be sitting with good posture when they do it.
Right.
And we don't reward that if they're not sitting with good posture. If they're not pulsing their quarter.
So like for instance, if they're counting measure of 4/4 notes. They have to do 1, 2, 3, 4. We tell them to make their voice like the metronome.
And
And
of
if
course,
they don't do that,
yep. Then we just say, hey, listen, or if they pulse erratically,
right?
which actually is
1, 2, 3.
yeah, we have quite a
couple
few
that are
sixth
doing that
graders this year that are doing
Yeah.
that. They're ready for jazz, I
I
guess.
guess.
Maybe. I don't know. They're going to
Some
swing it.
swinging, yeah.
We really hold them to that standard. And it's important that they understand that this is our standard. We are not going to change our standard just because you're struggling. However, we do have students that really do struggle, and we do things. Like Michelle said, we clap and count it with them. We'll give them credit for that, with
Or
the
sometimes
understanding
it's just like
that
counting along with them. If they can get that, just like hear somebody else doing it with them. Eventually, like right now, yes, we want them to be independent, but right now, some of them need that support just to get a little bit of success to keep them going.
And this year, well, in every year you have a few, but this year, creating some kids cannot hear that metronome, even though it haunts me in my sleep because it goes all day long at 80 beats a minute. So we provide visual interpretation in front of them. So I may move my hand up and down.
Yes.
I may tap my leg. I may
We have one student that really struggles with pulse, and so I will tap his shoulder while he's clapping and counting, just so he gets that kinesthetic feeling of it as well as the auditory.
And so that's just another way that we try to help our students.
It's differentiation buzzword, educator buzzword.
Yes.
Finding ways to help them get it.
In doing that, we take the extrinsic and we try to create it and move it to intrinsic. And how we do that in sixth grade is we give them a sticker. And I've said it once, I've said it a million times. Kids will do sketchy things for a sticker. I know some adults that will do sketchy things for a sticker. We give them a sticker. Each line that they complete, they get a sticker. We go through tons and tons of stickers. When they finish a sheet, they get a bigger, cooler sticker. And usually they get a grab out of the candy bucket, which we've already talked about in a previous episode. When they get to seventh grade, they don't get that immediate, the rhythm sheets are shorter. We don't give them a piece of candy for every. They have to go every third one. And
actually, I don't think we passed out candy for seventh grade this year at all.
That's where I was going with that and I've only had a couple that have asked, is we phase that out as we go. So we stop talking about candy. The candy bucket kind of disappears. And usually by Christmas, the kids have stopped asking.
Right.
Occasionally you have one that's usually they're a little bit behind, and so they need that. So you do that, but we kind of phase it out and trick them without them knowing.
Right.
Which is not a bad thing. But then
we
they
also
become more
have,
prideful
so
on
like
it.
in seventh grade, one of the incentives is once you finish clapping and counting the entire rhythm packet and playing it, then you get to help us pass off. And so for a lot of kids, that's an incentive to be able to go around the room at the beginning of class and listen to other people pass off their rhythms. And so, I mean, we feel like if they were able to clap and count everything and then accurately play everything, they're just as qualified as our high school students to
sometimes more
sometimes more, but
because
yeah.
High school students can see, and we do have student assistants in some of our class periods. We have 2 in seventh grade band this year. We don't have any in our beginner classes, though. Usually we'll have one or two, but we don't have any this year. So, which is great in our seventh grade class because we've got 40 of them, and trying to spend time counting rhythm can be quite
chaotic.
Yes. And if you came into our classroom at the beginning of class, in any of our classes, sixth grade are pretty calm.
There's a lot.
But
less
as far as our seventh grade goes, they're clapping and counting, they're helping their neighbor, they're fingering through, they're asking questions.
We encourage peer tutoring on these rhythms.
Now, we do have some that they're seventh graders. In seventh grade, I have a theory that every child should be cryogenically frozen at the end of sixth grade and thought about Christmas of their eighth grade year, because that's when all the hormones hit and they lose common decency, I guess you could say. And you have to remind them. You don't think before you do things or say things as to what the ramifications would be of what you're saying or doing. And so we have to remind them, sometimes mostly sternly, because that's what gets across. But you can only play the stern card so many times until they start to ignore it.
I'm also going to point out that my seventh grade band is scared of me, I think.
They are not scared of me.
And you can tell that like in the differences, like whenever we're each rehearsing them. If you were to come in when I was rehearsing them, I think that you would you would be like, okay, this is a really good controlled class. Josh tends to let things go a little bit more
I do.
sometimes, but he's also trying to get those kids to come into high school band.
And that's part of building that culture too, is we can't do it without students. And also when they get to high school band, and I have to be stern, and this year, I think I've only had to be stern a couple of times. Man, the shock factor, it's right there, and those students stand up. But because we've put the time into the culture, building them, because our seniors this year were my first class of sixth graders at Beckville. And so they're my babies. They've been with me the whole time. And we're going to graduate them this year. It's going to be very sad. I might cry. That is built all the way up. A big part of our culture too is, Michelle talked about peer tutoring. That's where it starts in 6th and 7th grade, is band student ownership. Now, that doesn't mean that they're running the show.
No.
That means that I consult them when decisions that they can positively contribute to need to be made. Sometimes that's just something simple like, what can we do to encourage people? What can we do to create a better family atmosphere? And they have great ideas. We do a game night in high school band, and almost every band student comes to it. The older students are encouraged to play games with the younger students, whether that's video games. We said some playing chess. I got beat really bad by some 8th graders on Ticket to Ride. Oh my gosh. I didn't even have a chance.
But if you were to walk around our band hall, you would see just kids having fun together of all ages, 8th grade to senior, and they all have something in common when they're playing that video game together or they're playing that board game. And so it's building those relationships. And that way our younger kids feel more comfortable going to the older kids for help when they need it. Or, the older kids are getting to know the younger kids and they feel cool. That makes the younger kids feel cool because, they're friends with the senior or whatever. But I think that is one of the big things that helps our culture.
And something else we do,
like
and I know a lot of band halls do this, is on Fridays, they're not allowed to ask us questions, especially the new kids. We have signs all over the place for them to...
Like it's levels of, have you asked your section leader? Have you asked an upperclassman? Did you ask a drum major? If you haven't asked any of these, don't ask the band director.
And we just kind of point to the sign. And I've seen some pretty creative ones. We encourage that because the older students have the information. They've done this before. A lot of times they can answer. And usually we're putting out fires the entire day anyway, which are things that are a little bit more substantial than, where do we put this or what time is this, even though we communicate that.
What time will food be here?
That's always the big
question.
one. What time's dinner? And like this week was our first time using part of our uniform because it's hot. It's hot. And even with our uniform that has shorts involved, we had some kids that got a little bit overheated and dehydrated.
Last week was our hottest game so far, which is weird because it's through 3-4 weeks into the season.
But we did our bibbers and our shoes and our band shirts, and we didn't have to really address anything because the upperclassmen took care of it for us. As far as this is how you put it on, this is how, make sure your shoes are tied, make sure you have long white socks, all those kinds of things. So we didn't have that problem because those students took ownership of their program. And I think sometimes students can sort of overstep that, I guess.
Occasionally.
And it's not very many, usually one or two, and you have to have that one-on-one conversation. And it's usually a difficult conversation, and it doesn't have to be a I'm the boss, you're not the boss kind of situation. It's a, hey, listen, here's the deal.
Let's talk about a different way we could have handled that.
Yeah, and because ultimately, even your seniors, they're still kids, and they're going to make mistakes. And band needs to be a place where you can make mistakes and learn from them without holding grudges or bearing horrible judgment or anything like that. And that's sometimes, and I find it hard sometimes too, to not harbor a little bit of resentment when a kid
I'm
oversteps.
the world's worst.
Yeah,
I hold
really
a grudge.
is.
I hold a grudge, and it is difficult for me sometimes when a kid makes me angry to just let it go.
Yeah, she still holds grudges against me from when we were dating. So I mean,
I'm not even sure what you're talking about. But
see,
okay.
She does. She brings them up when I least expect them. But yeah, we want those students to be able to feel comfortable and understand, listen, now is not when it's going to do the most damage, but out there in the real world, if that was the case, then you probably would have lost your job, or you probably might have ended up in way worse trouble than what's happening right. Sometimes that really hurts their feelings. But again, if it comes from a place of love,
Right.
they'll get over it.
They have to know that you care about them before you can have those serious conversations.
And you are going to have, and that's something too. And it still hurts me. Well, I guess it doesn't hurt me like it used to. Used to, if a kid cried, I would be very upset. And now if they cry, most of the time I didn't do, like, I wasn't mean. I don't understand why they cried, but I do know why they cry. If they come in and because they feel like they're disappointing
Right.
us.
Yeah.
And whether it's coming in to pass off music, that's usually when they cry, I guess.
They cry more for Josh than they do for me.
They
too.
do. And I try to talk them down. I go, no, listen, we can make this work. We can do this. And it's because they have such pride in what they're doing, even if they're uncertain about it. And so we try to encourage them to make themselves better and not worry about this particular time, because in the next time it's going to be better, and the next time it's going to be better if you continue to work on it, which sort of fits a saying. And this is he's pretty famous in East Texas, I would think. Mr. Denny Whitley is he has and he tells the story way better than anybody, but he has a saying that make your best better. And apparently he was teaching in Clarksville, and he had a student come in, and she was
passing off her music.
And it was not good. It was not good. He said, is that your best? And she goes, yeah, it is. And he said, well, honey, we got to make your best better. And so there's a lot of bands in East Texas that have adopted that. And I think it has made us all better, not just as performers or musicians, but as teachers too, because we're always trying to make our best.
And that's something we say to our kids, is that the best that you could do today? Okay, can we make it better tomorrow? Mm-hmm. Well, yes, we can. And so our kids, they know that if that's the best you can do, good for you. Let's keep working to make it even better. Mm-hmm. We do a lot of last time, best time, and
we do a lot of chanting back and forth.
Did we get better today?
Yes, and because you can have a bad rehearsal but still get better. You can have a good rehearsal and not accomplish anything. And not accomplish anything. You may feel, oh man, this was a great rehearsal. They did everything they were supposed to. Oh my gosh, what did we do in this? What did we just spend 2 hours doing? And so we always try to have the kids take stock in that. Something else that we do with our program is we set some goals. We set some big goals.
Goal setting is super important in our program.
Yes, and we start those goals in the 6th grade. Like we tell the students, from the very beginning, what do you want to get out of this experience? And some students, they're in band because they have to be. But believe it or not, by the time Christmas rolls around, they're trucking and they're having a good time and they're glad to be there. And that sort of makes us really happy, even if they don't stay forever and ever. We want them to have a good experience and get something out of it. We use the SMART approach, which if you're a Texas teacher,
it's part of your T-test.
If you have to do T-tests. Now, I can't remember what every letter does. But
okay, so it's S is specific. Your goal has to be specific. It can't be broad. So it can't be, I want to get better. You have to say what you want to get better at. So instead of, I want to get better at my scales, I want to be able to play these scales at this tempo. Yes. Make it super, super specific. The next one is measurable. How are you going to measure the goal that you have?
And I'm not very good at this.
What is your timeline, essentially? How are you going to know that you got better? Are you going to know because you're going to change the tempo on the metronome? Are you going to know because you played every note in 16th notes or whatever it is? So it has to be specific and measurable. A is for achievable. Is it something that you can actually do? So like a 7th grader saying they're going to make the high school all-region band, that might, depending on the 7th grader, that probably isn't going to be an achievable thing. And so we want our kids to know, like, we're honest with them. Okay, let's talk about, are you really going to be able to do that? If the answer is no, we're going to lead them towards a goal that is going to help them reach that in the future. But it's a smaller goal to get them there rather than having that huge goal to meet. And is it relevant to what we're doing?
It's all band.
It's all band.
That one's an easy one.
That one's
That's
the easiest one. And then what's the timetable? Like, when do you want to reach this goal? What are you going to do by when, essentially? And so whenever we're setting goals, we talk about those things. And some of your goals have like a very specific timetable.
Yes.
Like
all region, solo ensemble.
You have to reach that goal by this date. Some of them, it just depends on the student and,
this is true.
And what they're what their goals are.
And we set full
as a
band
band kid.
goals too, and
do.
and we ask our leadership. This is a big thing that they do in leadership training with us. Is we sit down and we put down goals. We write them down. We talk about do they fit all the criteria? Is this something that we could feasibly accomplish? And sometimes they get very ambitious. And what we try to do in Beckville is we try to stay in our little Beckville bubble. And as long as we're continuing to improve, Michelle and I are happy. When you begin to compare yourself, and we tell the kids this too, when you begin to compare yourself to everyone else, you lose sight of what and who you are.
Comparison is the thief of joy.
This is true. And it's hard not to do because what we do is inherently competitive.
Right.
Like, you can't tell me marching band is not competitive. Look at BOA, look at state marching contests, especially at the big school levels. It's insane the amount of competition that's there and the level and the quality of what you see at those levels. What we do is inherently competitive, but you can't get lost in it.
We compare ourselves to our past selves. That's
Yes.
what we try to compare to. We try not to compare to the school down the road. Sometimes it gets us a little bit.
Yeah,
but
it does.
for the most part, our kids understand that we're not expecting, like, we're not going, oh, we have to be better than that group. We're more saying we have to be better than ourselves.
And as long as you keep that in mind, we're usually pretty good. Actually, we're at our best, I think, when we keep that in mind.
Yes, I agree.
Because I can go back over my so many years of teaching, and every year that I've compared myself to another band, we have not been as successful as we could have been because my sight was set on that particular band or a particular contest. It just didn't come out as we had expected or had wanted, and we were quite disappointed, probably more so than we should have been. But it's always sort of a kick in the pants to say, hey, whoa, well, maybe we lost sight of what we were doing. And that's the thing with culture too, is sometimes that happens. Sometimes you can stray from what you're trying to do, but it's always still there. So you can't go, oh, well, I'm done. It's time for me to leave. No, that's not necessarily the case. Kids are kids, and every group that comes through has a certain character to them, and you have to adapt that to your culture. I mean, it's very apparent in any band. Every class, every grade level, you have good classes, you have bad classes, you have smart classes, you have not so smart classes.
I'm glad you said that way.
You have motivated classes, you have unmotivated classes.
Right.
You have classes where the students are vying for that top spot in the class rank. You have classes where if you took one student from the previous class and put them in there, they'd be valedictorian without even trying. You have classes where every student is going to become a tradesman, and there's nothing wrong with that. And those kind of kids do great things for your program. Our ag kids, especially our ag mechanic kids, they've done tons of stuff for us.
Yeah, sure.
Fixed things and welded things and done wonderful things.
They have ownership over that bass drum that keeps breaking.
Oh, my God. We have one bass drum. And I'm sure every band has that one instrument, but we have one marching bass drum. And we have ordered new ones, but, shipping and all that kind of stuff, we're still waiting on them. But we have one that has literally been put back together probably
in this year alone.
This year,
it's been at
five
least
times.
Five times.
Yeah. And it's like,
crazy.
oh, man, we got to find something for this or something for this. And it always happens to break in the middle of the drill as we're going up down the field. So it has been an adventure with that bass drum. We're going to have to give it a place of honor when these new ones come in. Something else with your culture is how do you define success?
Yes.
Are you okay with not bringing home the gold and everything? Are you content with creating long-lasting relationships? Figure out what your level of success is and what you're willing to, not necessarily, I'm not going to say accept, because you don't have to accept anything. What you're willing to overcome,
Right.
I guess. Because we don't accept anything. We acknowledge, and then we move on.
Right.
And we try to make it better the next time around.
Right. We learn from everything that happens to us, regardless of
Yes.
what it is.
And when we set our goals with our students, we always try to do a post-mortem session where we talk about, hey, did you accomplish this goal? Especially with our kids that try to go to All-State or State Solo
Yes.
Ensemble. Did you accomplish this goal? Most of the time, a lot of times it's no.
Let's do a little self-reflection.
Yeah.
What could we have changed?
Did you do everything in your power to make sure that you were going to be successful?
How can we approach this differently in the future to help us be successful?
And you're talking to kids that are doing a million different things. And we've talked about that. That was our last episode. Kids doing a million different things. Well, if they're doing a million different things, did they devote enough time to this? Are they, and some will tell you, yes, I did, and I'm content with the outcome. I made area but I didn't make the all-state band, but I was able to accomplish all these other things. And that's not a bad thing. That's knowing your limits. And that's something that we as adults have sometimes problems. I have huge problems with knowing my limits.
He does.
I don't know how to slow down.
Well, I mean, I don't think either of us do.
Yeah. And I think if we tried to write down all the things that we do on a daily basis, we'd probably have to be medicated.
Somebody said to me today, I just don't understand how you guys do everything that you do. And I said, we just do the best that we can.
Yeah, that's pretty much it.
I mean,
And I feel like that's a great way to approach your culture too. Do the best that you can. Eventually you'll get there.
something that I also think is important for culture is while we are always at the band hall, we also have other things in our lives. Like band is not 100% our lives. We have other things that we enjoy doing outside of band. And I think that helps us have a more positive culture too. I've been burned out places.
I have too. I have several times in an instance where I've lived at the band hall and haven't had any outside thing to refresh me or to lift me up over whatever hurdle was going on at school. And those things are important. And students need to understand that too.
Right.
It's easy to get bogged down, and especially students when they get to be seniors, especially if they're highly academic students. They're going to have a good cry in your office at some point. And you just got to let them, and you just got to listen and help them to understand that, yeah, we got to figure out a way around this, because you can't go through life feeling that way all the time. It makes for a very poor life indeed, I think. But I think everybody does at some point in their life. I hope that sort of gave you an insight as to how we build our culture. Culture is ongoing. It never stops, and it changes. The culture of my band program today is not the same as it was 2 years ago. And to quote the wonderful Dr. Mark Turner, it's not good, it's not bad, it just is. Thank you for listening, and we'll see you next time.
Bye.
Thank you for listening to this episode of Little Bandology. As always, you can always find us on Facebook at Little Bandology, or send us an email with your thoughts and suggestions about what you'd like us to talk about in our next episode. Send those to littlebandology@gmail.com.